Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're venturing into a pretty shadowy part of American history, the National Crime Syndicate.
Indeed. It's a topic that really captures the imagination.
It does. And we've got this document you provided, National Crime Syndicate PDF.
Hmm.
Our mission, like always, is to pull out the core stuff, the really gripping detail.
Right, so you get a solid handle on it without getting totally lost in, endless facts and figures.
Exactly. We'll look at how it might have started, who the key players were, what they were actually doing.
And even whether this syndicate as a single entity really existed in the way people sometimes imagine.
Okay, let's get into it then.
So this idea of a big nationwide criminal organization, it's compelling. And the source, it points towards 1929. That's the year that usually comes up.
1929. And the names everyone mentions are Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky, right? As the sort
That's
of architects.
Yeah, they're the key figures usually credited. And the place, Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Atlantic City. Which, maybe doesn't scream Underworld headquarters today. Boardwalk, casinos, maybe.
Eh, true. But the document highlights this really significant meeting there, May 1929.
Okay.
And some historians, some researchers, they reckon this conference was basically the unofficial start of the whole thing.
And the guest list for this meeting.
I saw.
Wow. It's
Yeah.
like a roll call of early 20th century crime legends.
Absolutely. You've got Johnny Fox, Torrio,
The notorious Al Capone.
Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, Frank Costello, the prime minister.
Right. Joe Adonis, Dutch Schultz, Longis Willman, Louis Slepp, Buchalter.
Vincent Mangano, a big New York guy.
Yeah, and Nucky Johnson, the boss of Atlantic City itself, was there. Frank Erickson, Frank Skellis, and Albert Anastasia. The Mad Hatter. Quite a gathering.
It really was. But, the source also offers another way to look at it.
Okay.
Some people see that Atlantic City meeting less as a formal founding and more like a coordination and strategy conference for bootleggers.
Ah, okay. So more practical. Prohibitions in full swing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Were they building a whole new structure or just figuring out how to work together better on the booze trade? It's a key difference.
It really is, because organized crime isn't always some rigid pyramid scheme, right? Sometimes it's just networks, shifting alliances.
Precisely, which affects how powerful they were, how long they lasted. It changes the whole picture.
Yeah, like you said, it's the difference between a merger and just collaborating on a project. The document also brings up the Kefauver Committee, right? The Senate investigation in the 50s.
It does. And their conclusion was that the National Crime Syndicate was a real thing, a confederation mainly of Italian and Jewish organized crime groups.
So by the 50s, that was kind of the official story, at least in law enforcement circles.
Pretty much, yeah. That view became quite prominent.
But were there questions about the committee's findings or limitations?
That's a really good point. The Kefauver report was definitely influential, but not everyone bought it completely.
Oh.
Well, some critics felt the idea of this single, all-powerful syndicate maybe played into stereotypes, and perhaps it glossed over how complex and often very local organized crime actually was.
Right. It's neater to imagine one big villain.
Exactly. But the report did cement this idea that these different groups were definitely connected, which leads us nicely into the structure and who was actually involved.
Okay.
Our source calls it a multi-ethnic, closely connected American confederation of several criminal organizations.
Multi-ethnic, so not just one background.
No. The main players, as Kefauver suggested, were the Italian-American Mafia and the Jewish mob. Those are the big ones.
But not the only ones.
Right. The document mentions others involved, maybe to a lesser extent, but still there. The Irish mob, African-American crime groups, even Polish-American gangsters and other groups get a mention. The estimate is at least 14 different criminal organizations were part of this network.
14? That's surprisingly diverse, actually, for an illegal network anyway.
It is, and very, very active.
Yeah, the list of activities in the source is long. Racketeering, which often meant shaking down businesses, right?
Extortion through threats, plus the obvious one from that era, rum running.
Of course. Then general extortion, bribery, drug trafficking, gambling, prostitution.
Robbery, fraud, money laundering. Gotta hide the cash somehow.
Always. Fencing, stolen goods, loan sharking, predatory lending.
Yeah, they really covered the whole spectrum of illegal ways to make money at a very diversified portfolio.
You're kidding. So with all this going on, who were their friends and who were their enemies?
Good question. The source points to key allies being the American Mafia itself, the Jewish mob, and maybe most famously, Murder Incorporated.
Ah, yes, Murder, Inc. We'll get to them.
These alliances probably gave them more power, more reach, allowed them to specialize maybe.
Makes sense.
But it also mentions rivalries with several gangs in the country, so it wasn't like they had total control. There was always competition, always conflict.
Right. Which brings us, to Murder, Inc. That name alone. The media really latched onto that one, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. They called it the enforcement arm of the syndicate. Basically, a crew of killers, mostly Brooklyn mafiosi.
And they operated when? 30s and 40s.
Yeah, primarily. Their job was carrying out hits, contract killings for different bosses within that larger syndicate network.
Taking out rivals, informants.
Exactly. Maintaining discipline, eliminating threats. And the leadership is key here.
Who was running it?
Louis Lepke Buchalter, a huge name in the New York rackets, and Albert Anastasia, the Mad Hatter we mentioned earlier. Very feared figures.
And who were they answering to?
Reportedly, they took orders from commission members, specifically Meyer Lansky and Joe Adonis.
So Lansky again, it shows how linked up everything was.
Definitely. The source also throws in other names, involved Abe Kid Twist Reeles, who later became a famous informant,
Right.
Harry Happy Mayoni, and even Bugsy Siegel seems to have had a significant role, maybe more hands-on.
Wow. It paints a really grim picture of how they enforce their rules. Just brutal efficiency.
It does. But then, just when you think you have a handle on it, the source throws in a curveball.
Okay, what's that?
Well, this whole idea of a formal National Crime Syndicate as one single organization, it's debated.
So not everyone agrees it was a specific thing with, like, membership cards.
Kind of, yeah. The document mentions a journalist, Robert Lacey. He wrote a biography of Meyer Lansky back in '91.
Little man, right, I've heard of that.
That's the one. And Lacey argued that this National Crime Syndicate doesn't really exist as something separate from the American Mafia.
So he's saying it was more like the Mafia working with other groups, and people just called that alliance the syndicate.
That's basically his point, that it might be more of a loose coalition or just a label people stuck on the cooperation that was happening rather than some distinct structured organization.
That's really interesting. It makes you question how we define organized crime itself. Is it always top-down, or can it be more fluid?
Exactly. Lacey's view emphasizes the Mafia's dominance, suggesting the syndicate was more about their strategic partnerships.
Okay, so if the beginning is a bit fuzzy, debated, what about the end? How did it fall apart, or did it?
Well, according to the source, the end is as uncertain as its origins. No single date, no big announcement, the syndicate is closed.
Yeah, probably not.
But it does say that by the late 1940s, things were changing. Murder, Inc. got dismantled, key figures were prosecuted, Reeles informed.
Right.
And most of the non-Italian parts of that network sort of faded or stopped functioning in the same way.
So the enforcement arm was gone, and some of the allied groups drifted away?
Seems like it. But individuals, like Lansky, they didn't just disappear. They kept operating, often working closely with the Italian families.
So less a clean break, more a fading away. Or maybe an absorption back into the main Mafia structure.
That sounds about right. It fits with that idea of a looser structure to begin with. If it wasn't super formal, its decline wouldn't be a single event either.
Yeah, key people getting arrested or killed must have disrupted those networks massively. And the world changed after World War II. The rackets probably shifted too.
Definitely. New opportunities, new threats. Okay, so let's try and pull this together.
Yeah, let's recap. We've talked about the possible start in Atlantic City, 1929. The big names, Luciano, Lansky, Capone, all those guys from different backgrounds.
The huge range of criminal activities they were into. Everything from bootlegging to murder for hire.
And that specific enforcement arm, Murder, Inc., chillin' stuff.
And then the whole debate was the National Crime Syndicate. A real formal organization, or more of a label for cooperation, especially between the Mafia and Jewish mobsters.
Right. But for me, the really big aha moment, it's seeing how connected all these supposedly separate crime groups were back then.
Absolutely. It wasn't just isolated gangs doing their own thing. There was overlap, collaboration, even specialization, like with Murder, Inc.
Yeah, and how fluid those connections were. They teamed up when it suited them, maybe turned on each other later. That adaptability seems key.
It really does. And thinking bigger picture, it makes you consider the legacy of this kind of organized crime. The syndicate, as described here, might have faded. But did that style of networked crime disappear? Or did it just evolve?
That's the provocative thought, isn't it, for you listening? Think about it. Do similar networks, maybe less visible, still exist today? Doing different things, maybe cybercrime, complex financial fraud?
How has organized crime adapted to the 21st century? It's definitely something to mull over.